Welcome everybody to Weird Growth, the podcast where we talk about the strange and sometimes unexpected paths that founders have on their journey to building businesses. I'm Cam Sinclair from Ammo Marketing, and today we are very privileged to have David Beros join us here in the Rift Studios. G'day, Dave.
G'day.
Thank you so much for coming along and spending some time with us today.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Mate, let's dive straight in. Tell us about yourself and what you're working on at the moment.
Yeah, at the moment I'm head of product at a company called DigitalX. That's had an interesting history of its own.
Indeed.
I've been there about 2 years. So they're listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, originally as a Bitcoin mining operation with mining rigs out in Iceland to take advantage of the cheap electricity and cool environment.
Incredible.
But the economics of that industry changed and the company pivoted into more of a software development firm, produced an app that was launched in 5 Google Play stores across Latin America to do foreign currency transmissions. And that used the Bitcoin blockchain in an interesting way to manage things around identity, and pivoted towards where we are today, which is helping large companies find the problems within their organization that blockchain is actually a relevant solution to.
Yeah, I love it. Quite a journey.
Yeah. For a company, and also for myself, I started there in November 2017. Which
the halcyon days.
If there's any like crypto nerds in your audience, will know that that's when the entire industry just went like maniacal.
This is when like taxi drivers were talking about Bitcoin, right?
Yeah. Every taxi driver not only was getting into Bitcoin, but they were recommending like the best ICO that was coming out that week, and yeah, it was epic. I don't think I'll see anything like it again. Not
until the next fad, anyway. Not until the next poppy flower or whatever. What's the Dutch the story about the Dutch flower? It's on the Wall Street.
The tulips.
The tulips, right? Yeah, there was like for a brief period in Holland there was this market, a bubble for tulips. Yeah, which was the biggest bubble ever before Bitcoin.
I saw a chart once comparing those in terms of like bubbleness, and Bitcoin's far exceeded those tulips now. The other one I used to love was learn about it in uni was roses.com. During the .com boom, there was this company, I think it did some kind of floristry stuff. They just changed their name to roses.com and their share price went up 20% in a day. Nothing changed except for the name.
Yeah, and the famous one's pets.com and all this wild stuff. And, you know, there's experienced players see these cycles come and go. And, you know, there were plenty of people at the time who were, you know, saying this isn't good, but it's human nature. Everyone wants to jump on the bandwagon. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's fascinating to watch and be a part of, you know, at least on the periphery of this industry. So what about before DigitalX? What were you into then?
So before DigitalX, I worked at Horizon Power, which is Western Australia's regional electricity producer.
Yep.
So yeah, everything that's not in the Perth area, they do, which is epic, right? Like they'll be servicing like Broome, but also a community of 50 people out in the remote middle of nowhere.
And what did you do there?
So I worked as a business analyst in their corporate innovation space, more specifically in their data science and, as they called it, cognitive technologies area. So looking at ways you could use machine learning to assess people's energy use and optimize it and incentivize human behaviors around various things about pricing and reducing consumption and promoting a more sustainable electricity grid.
So would you call yourself a numbers guy?
I do numbers.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The thing that strikes me about you, Dave, is you're a very personable guy. You know, very easy to get along with, and you know, it's actually a unique thing to come across people who are very technically proficient and, you know, get the technology behind things, but also actually be able to converse with other humans. Yeah. So you've got a cool mix there.
I think I've kind of found a personal niche by trying to synthesize. The human aspects, the numbers,
the tech whisperer,
the tech stuff.
Yeah. And in a funny way, that's kind of what we do too, right? Like we're a marketing agency for tech companies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, it's about distilling down these big, like, complex ideas into something which actually makes sense and is useful to people.
Yeah, and story driven as well. Finding the human narrative that
So
people
important.
can connect with emotionally.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. And so before Horizon, you were in stockbroking, is that right?
Yeah, so I started as like a bright-eyed commerce graduate.
I can just imagine young Dave coming out of uni.
Yeah, had my head filled with like the efficient market hypothesis and free market economics.
Love it.
And yeah, thought being a stockbroker would be cool. Had like visions of deconstructing like companies' business models and doing deep analysis on their like financial reports and finding out which was undervalued. And
How'd that pan out for you?
well, it's that classic like expectation versus reality thing.
Welcome to the real
That was the
world.
expectation. The reality was the best guys in stockbroking are salespeople, and you could be selling a washing machine or a car, but you just happen to be selling stocks.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
At the end of the day, all of these decisions really, for retail investors at least, they're emotional decisions, right?
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I like I said, with the efficient market hypothesis, like is Woolworths overvalued or undervalued? And then at the end of the day, someone would call you up on your broking desk and be like, I want to buy a new boat. Like, can you sell my Woolworths shares? Just like, but no, that was a really, really good experience. I think the thing that I enjoyed about that is you get exposed to a really broad, diverse range of the economy. So we were doing IPOs and capital raisings for like small exploration companies, gold mining companies, technology stocks, biotechnology. You're constantly sitting in front of like these CEOs and company managers, telling you about their business, and you get to see a whole bunch of it.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
All right, so fast forward back to DigitalX today. You're solving a pretty big problem there, right? Like, tell us about what is the problem that you're solving for the customers of DigitalX?
Yeah, well, primarily we're a blockchain technology company.
Yeah.
So I like to think of ourselves as like a venture design studio for blockchain, which has its risks, right? Because when you're a technology-led company, there's the danger of being, the hammer looking for a nail, right?
Okay.
Like,
yep.
and it is this nascent, very early, still maturing technology and industry, and people are scratching their heads on how they can use it and where the business value is.
A little bit like the internet industry was in the 90s, maybe.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. So we help companies twofold. The first is simply education and capacity building. So what is the technology? Where is it valuable? How does it work? And then using design thinking techniques to uncover areas and challenges and pain points in their business that are a good fit for blockchain. So,
Yep.
We definitely don't believe that everything should be on a blockchain.
Good.
Which, it's a very specific type of storing data that has certain characteristics that make it more valuable than not for some things.
Yeah. I was, thinking back to, that late 2017 period when we had, there was blockchains for cats. We had like a Bitcar or something like that, where you could like buy a piece of a performance vehicle on a ICO type thing. Everyone was trying to just throw the confetti and hope it lands on something which is going to make them into a millionaire.
Yeah, although I will defend CryptoKitties to the end of my days.
Please do.
Well, it was really interesting because they developed this token standard. So, the thing about tokens on a blockchain is they're all the same and they're fungible. But the CryptoKitties things it was a mathematically provable unique token. So for the first time ever, we had something that was digital and provably unique.
Yeah.
Which has applications for properties, so like non-homogeneous assets.
Right. So it wasn't about the kitties at all. It was about the other applications.
The kitties were just the tip of the iceberg.
They were just the marketing tip of the spear.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, right. Yeah. So DigitalX, there's a few different businesses going on there at the moment. You've got the consulting side of things, into the corporates. There's a fund. Is that something we can talk about? Or
yeah, absolutely. So the two main focuses at DigitalX are firstly, the consulting and development work, which is what I head up. But secondly, we've got funds management. So looking at bringing, investment exposure to these new asset classes to traditional mainstream institutional investors.
Yeah. So being a bit more grown up about it.
Yeah, absolutely. In a vehicle that they're familiar with, fits easily within existing regulation and tax reporting and those type of things, but has upside to this new digital economy that people are still figuring out.
Yeah.
So the first of those funds is just a straight Bitcoin fund. Bitcoin's been interesting because, it's been around for almost 10 years now. Well, it has been around for 10 years now.
There you go.
Invented in
2009, wasn't it?
Yeah, so October 2008, I think the white paper came out, and then first transaction was early 2009 amidst the backdrop of the GFC. And, has had a shady history. Like, there's no two ways about it. It was used to facilitate purchases on like the Silk Road and et cetera, et cetera. But I think now it's really come into its own with this narrative about it being digital gold. So the same way that, why is gold valuable? It's because it's hard to get out of the ground and it costs a lot of money to make more gold. And it's scarce, right? But now we have this digital scarcity, which is Bitcoin, that is mathematically provable to only have a finite amount. But relative to gold, you can transfer it a lot more easily. So that's the investment thesis that's forming around Bitcoin at the moment.
Makes sense, for sure. And as you say, around for 10 years, and plenty of volume of trade on there, and definitely. I had this argument when you might remember one of my earliest startups, VeryVote. We were going to be voting on the blockchain. And allowing people to run elections that way. And I at the time couldn't get my head around how is this similar to gold. What are the properties of Bitcoin that make it similar to gold? And then when you really understand that it's actually about something which is provably scarce and increasingly difficult to source, more expensive, then it does become a store for value. Makes sense.
Absolutely.
So for the consulting side of DigitalX, who's your perfect customer there, would you say?
So at the moment we're targeting innovation leads and I guess like chief financial officer type roles at large ASX-listed corporates predominantly. Being in Perth, that is mostly mining companies we've worked with. So people that have a budget and also decision-making capability to, say, run a proof of concept and experiment with the technology.
So describe the process behind dealing with so you've got almost like an oxymoron, you've got an innovation lead inside a big, old-school, conservative mining company. Those guys probably sometimes feel like they're banging their head against the wall internally, but what's it like for you dealing with them?
It's interesting. So they're... you're right. I mean, often they're quite constrained within those large organisations in terms of like radical transformations that they can do. So I think often what you see is it ends up aligning with more traditional business processes. So it becomes a question of how do we enhance this existing process or take cost out of it, et cetera, et cetera. And then on the more strategic end, it's looking 5-10 years out, like, is our business still going to be around, or how might X technology disrupt us?
Sure.
But I think the more tangible short to medium term stuff is taking a company's core competency, what they already do well, and figuring out ways of enhancing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was probably a little bit unfair there with mining companies in Western Australia. We're home to the world's biggest robot here in WA, right? Rio Tinto's train and automated truck fleet and everything that all works together there. We're actually pretty lucky to be here in WA at virtually the epicenter of some of these technologies. And I think you guys are positioned beautifully to help out in that. And what's more conservative than and safe and secure than having an immutable ledger which can't be changed, and actually that makes perfect sense for mining companies, and resources and those sort of businesses to actually utilise that tech.
I can give you a more tangible recent example.
Please.
We've been working with a few large oil and gas companies, and it's interesting, like the natural gas assets in this state, so like the Northwest Shelf, for instance, are typically owned under a joint venture arrangement with one oil and gas company as the operator, and then 5-6 participants in that joint venture. So in the case of the Northwest Shelf, Woodside's the operator, and the other 5 parties all have an equal share. That includes like Shell, Chevron, BHP, etc. So they're forced to cooperate and coordinate around this economic entity. But what does that look like in reality in terms of sharing data among each other, which is a necessity of that business, but at the same time they're still competitors. Like,
you can imagine quite onerous, really.
Yeah, and there's this really interesting dynamic where they need to cooperate and they have almost this shared ownership of an asset, but at the same time are competitors, and
there's some incentive there for
distrustful of each other. There's incentive to cheat sometimes.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
So looking at ways that blockchain can solve that, I think it is really where it thrives, because there's multiple writers to a shared database. So you need not just a single source of truth, but a shared source of truth is one way that we like to phrase it.
So we're a bit of a marketing podcast. You know, I'm a nerd boy around the tech stuff as well. But what I'm really interested in is you're in a business to business space here, and it'd be great to hear what your process is for actually starting to build some of those relationships with your customers.
Yep.
You know, how do you go about actually just making those guys aware that you exist, and what's the journey like for them dealing with you?
Yeah, it's interesting sometimes when I reflect, you know, the difference between being a technology consultant and building a technology consultancy business requires like very different skill sets.
Right.
And particularly, you know, what's the nature of this market that I've just described? It's long lead times, because there's large organisations where often the decision-making process is unclear to an outsider. Secondly, is all these sales, any, you know, big technology project, it's always relationship driven. You know, to take a more consumer focused digital marketing mindset to this game just wouldn't work, where you'd think, hey, let's run an AdWords campaign, push some traffic to our website, and you know, maybe this big
collect a credit card and wait.
Yeah, exactly. It just doesn't work like that. So the approach we've taken is firstly to build and establish relationships. So we've done that by partnering with firms like EY, who have existing relationships there as a financial auditor. So there's, you know, a good amount of trust. And running workshops where we co-create or co-design, if you like, what these solutions might look like, to do two things: to build trust in our capabilities and demonstrate that we can do it, but also give that, I guess, emotional buy-in from the customer or for the client to really believe in what it is that we're developing.
Yeah, so you said a really important word there, trust. And, you know, leveraging existing brands, EY, and, you know, those relationships is a really important way to do that. Are there any other ways that DigitalX builds trust in the marketplace with those customers? Yeah,
I mean, we're definitely pursuing thought leadership areas as well. So
you guys are the experts in this field, right?
Yeah, and we're fortunate by virtue of being reasonably well known in Australia. Like, we have a strong shareholder base through the ASX of 10,000 shareholders.
Is that right?
And we often get, you know, inbound leads to speak at various conferences. So like CPA Australia is a great one. The Office of the Auditor General. We've worked with ACT government. So yeah, positioning ourselves as thought leaders, just writing good quality content for the people in the space, and also the people looking to get into the space.
Yeah, what do you think it is about, you know, essentially you're giving away your IP by doing those things?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's kind of counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What? I guess it's kind of obvious, but what do you think it is that actually allows, or, you know, helps organisations like yours realise that actually we need to give before we take? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you really just have to back yourself on, you know, that motto that execution is everything. Like, you can give away the ideas and the recipe for free, but doesn't necessarily mean someone's going to bake a cake. You know?
Exactly. You're the guys with the real genuine expertise.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think part of that trust building exercise is doing things which don't necessarily seem like they're in your best interest at first.
Yeah.
You know, by seeming, you know, like benevolent, then that's actually the way that, you know, another way that you can show that you're to be trusted.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's definitely my philosophy, at least. And you know what? It actually makes being in business more enjoyable, because you're out there helping people at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, we realise that blockchain is still a maturing industry, and so we need runs on the board and successes as an entire industry. You know, we need to be part of that rising tide to lift the DigitalX ship as well.
Love it. lift all the Bitcoin boats out there.
Yeah. Well, there's some things that need to sink, but
but not CryptoKitties.
Yeah, not CryptoKitties.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So, any plans for the future of the business? Sort of, in this consulting phase at the moment. Is there anything else on the horizon?
Yeah. So, looking at actively taking some of the ideas we've worked on over the last 3 to 4 months into proof of concept, figuring out what the learnings are from there. And I mean, I'd love to see something scale to production.
That'd be cool, yeah.
Yeah. So doing more of that, basically.
Yeah, just making shit happen.
Yeah, yeah. And I think also it's interesting to what extent, you can productize some of these proof of concepts where it becomes scalable, not just to the organisation that has necessarily looked at implementing this solution, but to other organisations facing the same challenges.
Yeah. And so have you seen any products out there in this sort of enterprise blockchain space that you actually admire or that you think have done a good job?
Yeah. One that we've been speaking with the team on at the moment is Kaleido. So I think of those guys as like, so Ethereum is like a smart contracting blockchain.
Yep.
They are basically a online enterprise Ethereum implementation. So you can go on there and it's amazing. You can create your own blockchain in like 15 seconds.
Okay.
With a few clicks, you can spin up
like a private blockchain.
A private blockchain. You can spin up some nodes that each have their own AWS instance.
Wow.
And you can start running transactions. It's really quite amazing what you can do. And the ecosystem that's forming around that, there's a number of plugins for things like decentralized oracles, for instance. So trying to answer the question, how do you take real world information and then put that on a blockchain where you can still verify the authenticity and credibility of it? And lots of other just cool plugins.
Yeah. So would you say that we are at that point in the blockchain technology cycle? So TCP/IP came out as a protocol in the early 90s. The internet became a bit of a buzzword in mid-90s, and then the dot-com boom happened in 2000. And then, it took maybe 5 years or until until things like PayPal and eBay became, global brands.
Yeah.
There was sort of a 5 or 6 year period really where that, wasn't taken seriously as a business. Yeah. Where would you say in that cycle we are at the moment with blockchain?
Still early on. I think there's a couple ways it could go. It could kind of realize this decentralized utopia where power is handed back to individuals in terms of control over their own data, etc. Or it could go more the kind of private blockchain route where it becomes embedded into back-end systems of enterprises, and from a consumer point of view, we won't be even aware that we're interacting with a blockchain.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we don't say, we're interacting with a TCP/IP.
Yeah, exactly,
when we're
right.
Online buying shoes, right?
Yeah. I think both of those visions will be realised to some extent. But I like reflecting back on, I signed up for my Facebook account in 2007.
Yeah.
And if you go online and remind yourself of some of the screenshots that you were using in 2007 of Facebook, it's come a long way.
It was a clunky old beast back in the day.
Yeah,
wasn't
absolutely.
It? Yeah.
And just to think that it took 10 years to get to the point where we are now, that's not the result of big boom, a big bang disruption. It's small incremental improvements.
Yeah. I mean, remember the brouhaha that happened when they got rid of the timeline, the chronological timeline of Facebook. That was world news. There was outrage in the streets.
Yeah. And
you can't imagine it without it now.
Yeah, so I think the same will be true of blockchain technology development. And I also like to take it back even further and just reflect on, great companies like Toyota, where your Toyota is only as reliable as it is as a result of 50 years worth of Six Sigma innovation.
Yeah.
Which is, 6 standard deviations from the mean of quality control. That's an astounding thing.
It's not an accident.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty, average Joe is none the wiser. They wouldn't know what Six Sigma or a black belt or stuff.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, incredible. Do you have one big piece of advice to founders just starting out looking to grow a business?
Yeah, so when I worked as a stockbroker, one of the fortunate things I had the opportunity was to build an internal financial services business.
Wow.
Which...
How old were you then?
Enjoyed a reasonable amount of success. That was 2015.
Yeah, okay.
So I was like, I guess, 25, 26.
Mate.
Yeah.
It's a young man's game.
Yeah.
Finance.
But, yeah, and that became reasonably successful, and I was fortunate to be a part of it.
Well done.
But when I look back at it, I think, what are the reasons that enabled its success? And literally, like, the broking business I was working for, you could see the commissions every month, and the business that I was directly involved in, raising money for IPOs, made like 0 commissions for like 3 to 4 months, and I was like, I'm probably going to lose my job soon. At some point. Like, the IPO market was especially hard around then.
Yep.
But the guy, Jason Davis, that I worked for back then, this was his skin on the line.
Yep.
You know? So through a series of all-nighters, he created this website. It was a very scrappy minimum viable product, which launched with a little AdWords campaign for the purpose of helping people do a one-off share sale, which there's a whole...
So we're talking about SellMyShares.
Yeah, we're talking about SellMyShares. And there's a whole kind of like backstory on why that worked. But I think, to answer your question, the reason that it worked primarily was just there was everything to lose, right? It's like, if this thing didn't succeed, it just wouldn't have happened. So I compare that to, various side hustles that I've worked on over the years, where it's kind of inconsequential if it succeeds or fails, because, you've still got a good job that you go to. And
sure. So what you're saying is jumping in both feet is actually, it's almost a necessity if you're going to do this thing right.
Yeah, I think that grit and that determination, and really having everything on the line. Not to say that, you can do the late night side hustle and make something great, but I think more often than not, in my experience, the things that have really worked have been the things that have had to work.
Yep.
By emotional or financial necessity for that founder.
Yeah. No, that sounds spot on, Dave.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're getting to that time. Is there a question that you wish I'd asked you today?
Yeah, I'm not so sure.
No, that's okay.
The SellMyShares story is
it is, and I think we should actually get Jason in one time.
Yeah, you should. You should get him to tell it.
Sure. Yeah, and I think it's fascinating, especially from a more consumer marketing and product creation angle. It's a really interesting story, and one that a lot of people wouldn't know of, that came out of Western Australia, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. What would be really cool is if you have any show and tell, things that you want to share with people that you think that might be useful out there in Founderland.
Yeah, I'm a massive advocate for Zapier.
Yeah. The middleware.
Yeah. So that's an API integration platform. So you can take kind of any web service out there that exists: Google Sheets, Slack, MailChimp. Whatever you're using and building on.
Yep.
And you can integrate them together.
How good is it?
For like infinite possibilities. I reckon there are so many potential startup ideas with just remixing different integrations through Zapier.
What's your favourite little zap that you can create?
Actually, I looked at the interview process for Zapier.
Yep.
And one of their interview questions is, think of a zap that doesn't exist yet and tell us why it should.
Awesome.
So I think there's some really cool ones around there.
Yeah, for sure.
That you could use, like, taking it back to blockchain again, but like perhaps you could monitor a blockchain for a particular transaction, and then if that transaction occurs, then email blah, blah, blah list through MailChimp or something along those lines.
You're right. There's infinite possibilities.
And unless you create a web app without needing to create a web app.
Zapier is that. It is, yeah. And Zapier is it Zapier or Zapier? I don't know. Jason Calacanis, my podcasting hero, he says Zapier, but I don't know if that's the right way to pronounce it. But this is the hub of that free code or code-free movement.
Yeah.
Where there are no excuses in this day and age to not be able to build at least a basic MVP with some functionality which actually helps people in their lives. And just because you don't know how to write code, like you can actually pull things together and be scrappy about it.
Yeah,
you've got things like Bubble out there as well, which is a no-code mobile app tool. Typeform, Airtable, Zapier, all these things that you can stitch together and create really useful things without even knowing how to write a line of code.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about that is all those third-party apps and services, they just look so professional, right? You're effectively leveraging that into your MVP that just helps to a massive extent with trust and believability.
Yeah. So we have producer Jack sitting here with us as well. He's been diligently keeping an eye on the waves. Thanks, Jack. And I think he might have a little show and tell as well. So, Jack, I'll move the mic over. What do you have for us, mate?
Just your classic one is that a lot of people think that you can't learn anything online, but you can. I think in the last episode, we had a guy who didn't understand some marketing and he went and did an online course. Go out there, jump on YouTube and teach yourself via YouTube. I reckon that's my show and tell this week.
Nice.
It's very, very poignant, actually. Like, there's nothing on YouTube these days that you can't solve. We're both getting into renos, right, Dave?
Yeah.
Doing up old houses, and I've learnt a lot of the man skills that I'm now a proud owner of through YouTube.
Yeah.
Did you look when you had the bees in the house? Did you look up how to get rid of them on YouTube?
No, unfortunately that was more old school. I just had a mate that had 6 beehives. But
this guy bought a house and there's a beehive already built into it. This is wild.
It wasn't good. There was maybe 5,000 bees in my wall. And to make matters worse, that wall was made out of asbestos, so I had these deadly asbestos bees.
Asbestos honey flying around. Yeah. It's wild. Yeah, I love it. Dave, thanks so much. Really appreciate you giving up your time to be here and tell us about DigitalX and your story. If anyone's interested in what you're doing, where should they go?
Yeah, I'm David at digitalx.com or visit our website. Yeah,
superb. No worries, mate. Well, that's it for episode 3 of Weird Growth. I'm Cam from Ammo Marketing. Thanks to our producer, Jack. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.